What we're talking about today is equal opportunity monitoring. That's quite often the first point when a potential employee at a university discloses their sexual orientation, among other things. So why do we do it? And what's wrong with it? We're all given a form when we work at most universities and asked to fill it in. It's all anonymous, supposedly, and we tick boxes telling our prospective employers quite a lot of potentially quite personal things about ourselves. So why do it? And if you search on the internet for an answer to that question, it's actually really difficult to find. A lot of institutions, whether they're universities or not, public or private, they're all quite keen to say that we do equal opportunities monitoring to examine who it is that's working for their workforce and ensuring that there's a good mix of people to represent the people that they serve, and to look to identify where things have gone wrong, perhaps in the recruitment process, or if people are leaving from a certain group of people. But these are intentions, and there's very little evidence out there that suggests that institutions do actually do this. So, looking back at the 2011 census, there wasn't a question about sexual orientation, or gender identity for that matter. The Office for National Statistics, the ONS, expressed concerns about asking the question. And there were three main problems with asking that question. There's the question of what are we trying to measure? Is it people's identity? Is it people's behaviours? Is it people's attitudes, beliefs and desires? Will respondents understand the options? And are the categories appropriate? And this is a big thing that we're going to be talking about today. So I'll give you an example. So you examine staff data from an institution and you find 98% of the staff members identify as heterosexual. What does this tell you about the institution, and what would you do? We have over here two organisations, HESA, which is the Higher Education Statistics Agency, and we have ONS, which I mentioned before, which is the Office for National Statistics. So these are two surveys of similar sample size, and they asked, well, in the ONS case, members of the public what their sexual orientation is. For HESA, these are staff members at UK universities. Actually, 98% say that they're heterosexual or straight. In higher education, it's probably closer to 95% identifying as heterosexual. So from this, it looks as though higher education is perhaps more welcoming and people can feel more open in that environment about their sexual identity. So now this purple bar here, don't know or refused. So these are people that have indicated in the questionnaire that they either don't know what their sexual identity is or they refuse to answer that question. Similarly, we have about 5% in ONS and about 30% in higher education that have refused to answer that question. But again, I have to inform you that I have been slightly misleading with this slide. So the grey bars on this one, unknown or no response. So 2/3 of staff in higher education have not given a response to the HR monitoring form, whereas for the ONS household survey, it's less than 1% have skipped the question. And we have to wonder why. We do have a problem with people filling out these monitoring forms, and if they don't fill it out to the extent that 2/3 aren't, then we can't trust the figures that we do have. Ursula Barry, she said, in the likely circumstance in which a significant or majority proportion of the lesbian and gay community were not in a position to disclose their sexual orientation, such inaccurate quantitative data could then be used to reduce the level of recognition, funding of, or service provision to that community. But there's also a problem with inaccuracies. So there are reasons why, particularly in the census, why there might be people that have their sexual orientation incorrectly labelled. If you've had a negative reaction in the past after you've come out to someone, you might not want to do it again to an anonymous person on a sheet of paper. If you're in a relationship that seems contrary to your sexual orientation and you've got someone, maybe a partner, looking over your shoulder while you're filling it in, you might not want to say that you belong to a different orientation to what they would be expecting. And also in the census, it's given per household. So if one person is charged with completing the survey on behalf of everyone in the household, you might not get the everyone's true sexual orientation that way. This is from Stonewall. So one of their guides, they say, at Stonewall, we know that when lesbian, gay and bisexual employees, this was published before they added transgender people to their remit, they're better able to be themselves at work, their performance improves. They enjoy going to work, more loyal, more creative, make greater contributions to the organisation. And there's a legal obligation on the part of institutions as well, particularly universities. So this is the Equality Act 2010. And it defines sexual orientation in this way. So persons of the same sex, persons of the opposite sex, or persons of either sex. That excludes a lot of people. One of the groups that isn't represented in that are asexuals. Bogart in 2004 did a study to explore this group of people in more detail, and he found in the UK about 1% of the population are asexual. This is why a few of us have formed this organisation called Maple. So because of my vested interest in finding out about asexuality monitoring in UK universities, I asked, how do you ask new staff members about their sexuality or sexual orientation? If this is asked through equal opportunities monitoring, what is the question and what options can individuals select? So I sent this question to 126 different universities, in fact. So, bisexuality. So, 111 universities, at all of them, you could say you're bisexual in some way. Heterosexuality. So, we've got heterosexual, but now we've got heterosexual/straight. Again, if you are heterosexual, there are 111 universities you can go to and express your identity. This category is very interesting because, as you can see, quite a lot of these are separated by gender. So it seems to me somewhat strange that they are separated by gender if that kind of thing can be discriminated from with a gender question. So a few universities still use homosexual on its own, which actually works as a good catch-all term for people that identify as, say, non-binary, that are attracted to other people that are non-binary, whereas gay and lesbian perhaps wouldn't really apply to them. And unless you are non-binary, some of these options won't apply to you, but if you identify as gay or lesbian, then there is an option for you at every one of these universities. Now the best slide, asexual. One university in the country, can you tick a box that says asexual? If you are asexual, there are other options for you. So 89 universities out of the 111, there would be an option appropriate for me. But at 22 universities, there is no option that I can tick that describes what I am. So my recommendation is that have a please specify. So there's one university that included transgender in the sexual orientation question. It's hard to get started on how many ways this is wrong. Then you've got these two. Now they're interesting. Not sure and not known. Gender is fluid. So is sexual orientation. They're two very different things, but they're both things that we kind of experience and get used to and learn about ourselves over time. So it could very well be that you don't actually quite know what your sexual orientation and your identity is, and you're not really able to give a response. So you might be forced to tick other if that's available, but that might be a better representation of who you are. But only 2 universities in the country let you say that you don't really know. And then we've got the declined. So at 106 universities, you can refuse. So monitoring can be helpful. It can also be misleading. It can be illuminating, but it can also be problematic. We need to encourage more people to answer these questions in order to get more reliable and meaningful data from them. There's no single best practice, and it's also possible to be well-meaning yet dangerous. And I do mean dangerous, because, I mean, that transgender was particularly upsetting to me, but there were other examples that I could have shown that you can upset people by doing this. So you really have to think hard about this question and the effects that it will have on people.